Okay, so now we're ready to place the stitches back on the knitting loom. The stitches that were on side A go on side B, and we're going to start with those. I'm going to clip that knot because it's easier. Then I'm going to grab that first stitch, place it on the first peg, grab the second stitch, the same. Make sure when you place the stitches that you don't place them twisted. As you can see, when I have the stitch, the legs should be right to the front. The legs of the stitch, it should look like a V. Put it back on the peg. Same with the next one. You should have 7 stitches from that scrap yarn. If you don't, it's because you dropped one, so be very careful when you put them back on the knitting loom that you don't drop any of the stitches. And now I'm gonna put the last one. My 7th is right there. Again, making sure that I don't twist it. Put it on the knitting loom. My first 7 stitches are on. I am going to do the same to the other side, so simply turn the board around, clip that scrap yarn, the knot if you made a knot. Now put the stitches on the knitting loom. You can start on either side. So I'm gonna grab that first one, put it on the first peg. Notice I am using a different method on this side. I am not taking out the scrap yarn until the very end. I'm putting the stitches on. You can do it either way. You can take the scrap yarn out as you're putting the stitches on the pegs, or you can leave it and then remove it afterwards. Whichever method you prefer, both of them work just the same. I just wanted to show you both methods. Now all the stitches are on, 2, 4, 6, 7. Now I can remove the scrap yarn. Simply grab it by one of the ends and slide it off. There we go. Side A has been placed back on the knitting loom. Now side B, we're gonna do the same thing we just did. Side B was the one with the red scrap yarn. As you can see, the stitches are being crossed. On this side, I'm gonna start again. As you can see, this was the side where we didn't make the knot on the scrap yarn, so we don't have to clip anything off. 1 stitch, 2, making sure I don't twist any of them, 3, the next one, 4, 5, 6, and the last one, 7. Okay, now I grab one of the tail ends of that scrap yarn and I pull it through. I have 7 stitches, 2, 4, 6, 7. Oh, you see this one? Trying to escape. Let's put it back on. Perfect. Now we're gonna do the same to the other side because we're working in double knit. Now it should be towards the center of the knitting loom. Perfect. Now we can start putting them back on. Putting them back on. I'm gonna start at one end right there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then the last one, 7. There we go. Grab to the end of one of the tail. Grabbing the end of the tail, simply pull it through. We have all 7 stitches on the knitting loom from side B. Now we have these yarn tails. Just leave them to the middle of the knitting loom and they'll get sandwiched in between. Here is the way our headband looks right now. The twist has occurred. It has a nice increased shape when we created our increases. It looks exactly the same on both sides. The twist is right there. Increases as we go up, forms a nice shape. Now we have again our 14 stitches on the knitting loom, and we are ready to proceed with working 10 rows in stockinette stitch over these 14 stitches. So let's get you to that point, and then I'll show you how to decrease. First, remember, you gotta hook your working yarn back onto the knitting loom. I'm gonna turn it this way. It was before. I have my crochet hook, have my working yarn, and I am ready to begin by first hooking it on. I'm gonna go below 2 of the strands there. I hook that working yarn. All I need to do is just pass it through. That tail end will go through the center of that knitting loom on the center, laying it down about 6 inches long. Now my working yarn is on my left side. I'm gonna take it down to the first peg, and I'm going to start wrapping in the stockinette method. This way. Turn around and doing the same to the other side. Remember, we need to work 10 rows in this method. As you can see, each peg has 2 loops on them on one side and 2 loops down the other. Start knitting from the midpoint all the way to the left side, and then go to the midpoint all the way to the right side. Let's work 10 rows in this method. So here we are. I have knitted the 10 rows in stockinette stitch. This is the way our headband is looking right now. Now we're ready to begin the decreasing portion. To decrease, it is fairly simple. All you need to do is bring the outer stitches in one spot, and this is the way we do it. Simply grab the last stitch from the last peg and place it onto the adjacent peg. Let's show you that again. That's too close. Grab that last stitch, place it on the adjacent peg, grab that stitch, place it on the adjacent peg, last one, place it on the adjacent peg, opposite side, the same thing. Perfect. You have the last pegs empty. The pegs adjacent to the last peg have 2 loops on them. You will treat these 2 loops as one loop on the following row that you work on, and this is the same on the opposite side. Now to begin wrapping, we do the same thing as we did before. Take that working yarn to the bottom peg, wrap, and go up. Turn the border around, and we do the same to the other side, so that each peg, except for the last ones, have 2. The last pegs have 3 loops on them. There we go. Now we're ready to knit over. Again, we're going to knit over the same way that we knitted over before, from the midpoint out to the left, midpoint out to the right. We have 4 rows that we have to do in this form in stockinette stitch. When you reach the peg with the 3 loops, grab the bottom 2 over the top, just like that. Push them down. Now we go to the midpoint and knit off towards the right. Other side, grabbing those 2, over the top, push them down. Now we turn the board around and we do the same to the other side. From the midpoint to the left, midpoint to the right. Lifting over the top. We're reaching the last peg that has the 3 loops, 1, 2, 3. Grab the bottom 2 over the top, go back to the midpoint, lift them up. Perfect. Now we have the last one that has the 3 loops. Grab the bottom 2 over the top. Perfect. There's that first row. Now we need to do 3 more rows just like that. So go ahead, do 3 more rows of stockinette stitch. On this next row you will have all the pegs. This time we'll have 2 loops on them. Only that first row will have 3 at the last and at the first and last pegs. I am finishing knitting row number 4, and then I want to show you one more row of decreases so that you can make sure that you're doing them correctly. So here we are. I'm just knitting over on that last 4th row. Okay, we're ready for another decrease. For the decrease, you grab the last peg, not the peg, the loop on the last peg, move it to the inside one, loop on the last peg, move it to the peg to the inside. We do the same to the opposite side. Grab it on the one that's adjacent to it. Same thing to the other side. Let me turn it about so you can see it. There we go. The last, now we have 2 pegs that are empty. The last peg has 2 loops on it, the same at each end. That's one, that's the decrease row right there. And then you are ready to wrap and knit just as before, and you continue repeating those steps. You have a decrease where you bring the stitches in, and then you knit 4 rows in stockinette stitch, and you continue in this form until you have only 4 stitches remaining. Here I have already finished my 4 rows with the 4 stitches, and I am ready to bind off. To bind off, I simply move the stitches from one side of the loom to the other side. Here we go. 2, 3, and then, oh, it's popping off. Make sure it stays. There you go. And 3. Now one side is empty and the other side has 2 loops on each peg. Now I am ready to bind off. I'm going to do a regular bind off, and I'm going to use these 2 loops as 1 loop on each peg. So I'm going to knit the first one, lifting both loops as 1, knit the second, again knitting both loops as 1, move that stitch over, lifting over 1 more, moving it over to the spot, knitting, over, binding off, move it over 1 spot, binding off as we move it over. Go, and now we only have 1. I'm gonna wrap it, and I'm going to lift both loops over the top. I'm going to cut the working yarn, leaving about 6-inch tail. I'm gonna grab that stitch and I'm gonna pull it through, and it's all done. There we go. That side is bound off now. So, the bound off side. Then we have the cast on side. For the bind off edge, for the cast on edge, we're going to, as you can see, the stitches are a little bit loose from that figure 8 cast on. So I'm going to start on the opposite end of the yarn tail, and I'm just going to hook the stitches so they become a little tighter. Getting to the last one at the end, grab the yarn tail and pass it through. Perfect. And as you can see, it makes a neater edge. Now we're ready to add the button, and then I'm gonna overlap. Here we go. I'm overlapping it, and then I'm simply going to stitch it in place. I just want to secure it. Once I've done that, go to the other side. You can see there's my yarn tail. I'm gonna hide the yarn tail through the knitting between the two weaves of the front and the back, but just simply going up the stitches, just hiding the yarn tail. Perfect. Once it's hidden, I'm gonna clip it close. I'm just gonna tug, and I'm going to use this yarn tail to sew that button in place. So I'm simply going to thread the tapestry needle. With the tapestry needle, I'm going to go through the overlap, and I'm just going to secure the button in place. Since the cast on edge is seamed already to the bind off edge, the button is just for decoration purposes, so I'm just gonna do just 2 simple loops around the button. And then I'm just going to make a little knot with the yarn tail right there. Then I'm gonna hide the ends just like I did the last time by sandwiching the yarn tail through between the front and back right there. Once I do that, I'm gonna clip that yarn close to the knitting. Then I have these yarn tails right here. These ones are from where we divided the 2 sides, and they're already woven into the knitting, so all we need to do is just go back and clip them close, and your headband is done. I hope you enjoyed this video and hope to see you next time. Thanks.